Web Marketing Network's podcast, episode number 126, with today's guest, John McGrath.
Welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Come behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments and listen in as amazing guests confess the truth about what really works. Now, here are your hosts, Adam Franklin and Toby Jenkins.
Hey, it's Adam Franklin here on the Web Marketing Network's podcast, joined by my co-host, Toby Jenkins. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good, Ads. Good to be here again.
Nice. What's going on up in Brizzy?
I was up early this morning and went for a bit of a swim up at Centennial Pool, for those who might know it. Bit of a cooler morning this morning, actually, with winter coming, as the Game of Throners like to say.
Well, I'm down in Sydney, as you know, and the temps really dropped off today. I've actually got the, it's definitely full wetsuit weather down here at the moment.
Yeah, nice. Half your luck.
Yeah. So let's get on with the show. This is the show for people who love marketing on the web. You'll be taken behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments. Tobes and I and our guest, we're going to look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. We're going to confess what's failed and also reveal the truth about what really works.
This show is brought to you by our book, Web Marketing That Works, and specifically the bonus templates that go with it. So you can pick those 33 free marketing templates up from bluewiremedia.com.au/book. Ads, who's joining us today?
Okay, so today's guest is John McGrath, who I've been hoping to have on the show for the last year or so. And I met John about a year ago on a speaking roadshow, and he just had so many interesting things to say about business and marketing that I was very pleased we could get him on the show today. He's actually the founder and CEO of McGrath Estate Agents, and he's written several books. The one that I particularly enjoyed was called You Inc., which he wrote probably over a decade ago, actually. He's done some work on TV in recent years, and he hosts a podcast with Tom Panos called $1 Million Agent. And one of the reasons I was keen to get him on the show is because he's built a huge profile in Australia particularly, and he's done it off what I would call content marketing, whether that's content he's published in books, whether that's content that he shares on his podcast, whether it's content that he shares at his conference, his big ARIC conference that he has on the Gold Coast, or whether it's content that he talks about on TV. You know, it's all content marketing, and it's all served to help him build a massive profile and a really successful business as well. So they're the reasons that I'm excited to have him on the show, and I reckon we jump straight into it, Tobes.
Sounds good.
My name is Adam Franklin, and on the line I have John McGrath. Welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. John, how's things?
G'day, Adam. Really good, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. I've admired what you've done with your content marketing over many number of years, and the first question is regarding the book that you wrote back in 2003 called You Inc. What impact did publishing a book have for you?
Well, look, it started out, I've actually written a few, Adam, and then the first one started out was a bit of a dream because I'd always got so much from reading books, and I used to love bookshops. It was one of my favourite environments, and I always dreamt of going in one day and I'd actually have my own on the bookshelf. So there was a bit of a dream there and aspiration for me. So I wrote one, and it ended up going quite well, and I ended up writing a few more. So I think for me, it started off as, just sort of a bit of a goal, but then I realised that it does give you a high level of credibility. So two or three things, actually. It gives you a great level of credibility, I think. So it's a bit like a great business card to have a book, especially if it's on a subject that, is your particular expertise. So I think, that's really critical. The other thing is it forces you to think back and organise your thoughts in a way perhaps you've never done before. So I had to go back and, sort of chose the chapter heads based on the best experiences that I've had, best learnings, which are not always the best experiences. And so I think it was really, for me, a very good process, each and every one, to go through those. So I really encourage anyone that is out there listening that's got a book inside them or has got a particular expertise around a subject, you really should contemplate it. If you do it properly, it's not as hard as you think.
I know there's a Seth Godin quote that says the best book is the one that you write yourself. So looking back on the books that you've written, which would you say has had the biggest impact for you personally?
Oh, look, I think, it's always hard to beat the first experience of anything. So the first one I wrote was called You Don't Have to Be Born Brilliant, and I think that was good. And that kind of reflected the stage of my life where I hadn't done well at school and I'd sort of come through and was starting to do some good things in the world of business. So that was really the content of it. And the second one, Ewing, that you referred to, that was when business was starting to take off a bit more and I'd learned some more business lessons. So, and I did literally write them myself. That was the important part of it for me. I did have someone help me edit and sort of get the order and the priorities right. But, the words and the concepts are all my own. So it was a very good process, actually.
Awesome. Now, let's move forward a few years. You've recently, well, not that recently, but relative to the book, you've started your podcast, The $1 Million Agent, that you co-host with Tom Panos. It's been getting rave reviews and lots of downloads. Has it met your expectations?
Yeah, it's one of those funny things that happened. I was listening to a podcast one morning, Adam, and as I was listening to it, I thought, God, I get a lot out of this. I picked up the phone. It was very early, about 6:30 a.m. one morning. And I know Tom's an early riser, and I rang him up and I said, Tom, we should do one of these things. They're really good. The industry is looking for information and leadership. So we just, a week later, we got together and just started doing it. So it was very simple, like a lot of things in life that end up being quite meaningful. It started out as a simple idea that we just decided to execute on the spot. Yeah, look, we love doing it, and we aim to do one a week, and we pretty much hit that consistently. It's rough and ready, as most good podcasts are. It's not highly polished. It's not cut in the studio. Sometimes we do it at his office, sometimes at my office. I do no preparation, not because I'm lazy, but because I actually want it to be authentic. And so Tom will often say, we've got 5 questions this week to do on the podcast. Do you want me to send them to you? And I always say, no, let's just ask them and let's talk about it, because I'd rather just give you my raw, intuitive response as opposed to thinking it too much. So it's been really good. I think we have 6,000 or 7,000 people seem to listen to it on a weekly basis. So it's a good experience also.
Yeah, I find podcasting is such a good tool for getting to know new people and for also getting a lot of the thoughts and ideas down from conversations that you'd have normally but other people wouldn't be privy to. So it's really good that you share that. And I'm not a real estate agent, but I'm a marketer, but I find tremendous value listening to your show because there's so many lessons that apply to business in general and not just people in the real estate industry. So it's good. It's a really good one.
Adam, I think that, you and I and probably all people that are listening realise that most things that make you successful in whatever your business is are generally the principles cut across almost every industry. And in fact, they cut across not just business, but in life. So, live life with integrity and run your business with integrity. Be organised in your personal life. Be organised in your business life, be passionate and vulnerable in your personal life and your business. So I think you're right. It doesn't really matter what your industry. You just find some podcasts and some people and some blogs to follow. You mentioned Seth Godin before. He's been one of my favourites over the years. So it's not hard to find nowadays. And then a lot of the good content is inexpensive or free.
Yeah, and it's so freely available. Hey, you can just I love going for runs or when I have to commute somewhere, just listening to a podcast or an audiobook particularly because where else would you get to go for like an hour-long jog with someone like yourself and Tom Panos in your ear giving you all this good quality advice, or Seth Godin or whoever? It's awesome.
That's exactly the thing, Adam. And, I say to people often in my seminars or coaching, and I say, look, you got a choice in the morning. You're driving to work at 7 a.m. You can listen to the 7 o'clock news, or you can listen to talkback radio, or you can listen to a book, or you can listen to a podcast. One's going to change your life to the positive and one to the negative. So, I encourage people, because it's all about little habits, little changes, little discipline, little shifts in your life that make massive differences. And that's just one good example.
Now, speaking of conferences, you speak at a lot of conferences, and that's how we crossed paths last year. What impact does speaking have with what impact has it had on your profile?
I think, Adam, it's a little bit like a book that, it gives you a level of credibility and it networks you. And if you're selective with regard to the events you speak at, if they're quality events at quality venues with the right audience, it can be a terrific way of building your business. And at the same time, again, like writing a book, you have to think about what's working for you, what lessons you learned, what's not working for you, and you have to be able to kind of put them in order and then articulate them. And, your speaking is great. I love your work. And, you were probably like me, a lousy speaker or communicator at one point. And the only way to get better than it is practicing and practicing and practicing. So all of us need to be able to communicate better. There's no doubt about it, whether that's one-on-one, doing a business pitch, pitching your idea, recruiting someone, inspiring your staff. You have to be able to communicate well. So if that is a core skill, the best you practice it as much as you can.
So aside from practicing, are there any pro tips you've got for improving speaking from a stage?
The best advice I got from a friend many years ago, he came and watched me speak at an event at King's Cross. It was a swap salesman with a purpose. And he came and saw me afterwards. He said, I'm going to give you a couple of tips, but I'll fax it to you. There was no emails in those days. We're going back probably 20, 25 years. And he faxed me a little kind of a stick sketch of a person, human being, and he drew a little line from the head to the heart, and he said, shift your speaking from your head to your heart, you'll never look back. And I rang him up and I said, Ian, what did you mean about this? He said, I really liked your content, and it was fantastic stuff. I saw people taking notes. But he said, I'd love you to kind of just, channel, go to your soul, go to your intuition, go into your heart and connect them at that level rather than kind of more of they call it an academic level. So I did that, and I thought about it. And so I started channeling stuff, and I started just trusting that the right message would come out at the right time to the right audience. So I still do a lot of preparation, but I kind of, I do preparation in most of my work so I can then forget it. It's a little bit like at what I call a listing presentation when I'm talking to someone about having us sell their property. If you practice it and rehearse it and get really good at it, you get to a point where it actually just becomes part of what you do. So, I think lots and lots of preparation, so you get to a point where it just becomes a natural part of who you are.
And in your presentations, you talk a lot about getting 10x results. When you reflect back on the content marketing things that you've done over the last couple of decades, what marketing activities or efforts have delivered you the 10x results?
Yeah, look, it's me individually, I guess I'd have to say what we were just speaking about. One was the ability to communicate to small or large groups, a vision and a way of doing things, whether it's internally to your own team or externally to a greater audience. That has a huge impact. So I think that's really critical. I think, the habit of innovation, always looking for better, new, improved ways of doing what you do. Because I go to work every day, and I got a couple of obsessions. One is doing it better than yesterday, and two is finding a better way altogether of doing it going forward. So my mind is sort of constantly on the radar, looking for how I can do those two things with my team, of course. So I think that's really critical. Connecting skills, everything you do, and I don't care whether someone's listening to this podcast who's a technology head selling widgets, something more around what a lot of people think is not necessarily a people industry. Mine clearly is in selling real estate, but it's all about people. It's really about your ability to connect with people, your ability to inspire people, your ability to get people to trust what you do and what you say and who you are. So I think, developing those connecting skills is really vital. So they would be probably a few of the things that I recommend to people to really ramp their business up. The reason I talk about 10x, I used to talk a lot about 2x, Adam, and 2x, literally, if you like, doubling your business, doubling whatever you're doing, getting twice as good an output. I talk about 10x now for a few reasons. One is so many people that I was working with in my team that I was coaching, and they actually soared straight past 2x, and they did 3, 4, 5, 6x. So in a sense, good problem to have, 2x almost became an outdated concept. So then I started thinking about, what would 10x look like? Well, that's a whole new stratosphere altogether. And I like sort of talking to 10x because you actually have to reinvent yourself almost totally to 10x. Because for most people, if you think about you're selling 100 widgets, to go to 1,000, that is a massive shift, and you have to think about whole new style presentations, maybe new product offering. So it really forces you to reinvent yourself massively, as opposed to, I think a lot of people can, within 2 or 3 years, 2x just with incremental improvements. So I'm all about reinvention now.
I like that. And your point about connecting with people and working on those relationships and the fact that it is all about people. Social media is just such a powerful tool that we've got at our disposal these days that didn't even exist really 5 or 10 years ago. And now we can connect with virtually anybody and we've got access to them. But of course, it's what we do and how we approach that makes or breaks, whether we can use it effectively. But, we used to have to spend thousands of dollars on databases and lists of people to reach out to them. And I think these days, sometimes we take it for granted or we don't really fully appreciate just the power of these social platforms that make it so easy for us to reach out to people and form those business relationships, whereas that was very, very much more difficult to do a few years ago.
Well, Adam, in the old days, and you're right, the old days were kind of a few years ago, really, weren't they? You had to have a huge marketing budget or a big corporation or a lot of outlets or something if you wanted to get a new idea through the pipeline. Nowadays, you can be sitting in your bedroom and access to Twitter and have a brilliant idea, and you can have that out pretty quickly. And then, through viral messaging and people spreading and passing stuff on, all of a sudden you can have, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of people exposed to your idea or your book or your business or your product. So, I mean, anyone that used to have the excuse that, I haven't got enough budget, well, that excuse has gone way out the door because there's so many ways for little or no money. You can access information, you can spread good ideas, you can distribute your product. So, it really is unlimited now in the true sense of the word.
Yeah, totally agree. Now, in some of your keynotes, you speak a lot about the value of mentors. You mentioned a few. Just how valuable have your mentors been, whether virtual mentors or real in-person mentors? Like, how important have they been for you with your business journey?
Oh, look, they're really critical. I'm glad you mentioned or refined it to virtual or actual, because I would say that most of the people that I would actually call mentors I've never met, but they're people I've studied. And, I often talk about Steve Jobs because, he had started Apple not that long before I had sort of left school and was thinking about business. And I just thought, what he did and where he came from, how he started, it was just such one of the great stories in history. So I think, if you don't have access to someone you deem to be a great mentor, you can go to YouTube and there's tens of thousands of great mentors there. Just, Google some people that are highly successful on YouTube and you can listen to their philosophies or you can watch a speech they've given. And again, it's free. So no excuses. I think, mentors are really critical because sometimes we get caught up in our own head and we think about things and we get stuck and we're not sure how to get unstuck. A mentor for me is someone who you trust, who you deem to have a high level of wisdom in whatever field you're in or just in life in general, and that is prepared to give you some time and space to sort of unjumble your mind. And often when you go and see them, within 5 or 10 minutes, all of a sudden the path is looking clearer because, you've got into an environment in a safe place. You start stating the problem. That helps the problem resolve itself. And then, when you're in the company of these people, they just seem to be able to help you get unstuck really quickly. So, it's been a great help for me.
Yeah, I found it incredibly reassuring and comforting having mentors particularly when there's a few challenges that present themselves, as they always do in life and in business, to sit down or to call up a mentor and actually get that calming impact from them. It's just wonderful to know that you've got a few people in your corner as well when things do get a bit tricky, and also to celebrate some of the good times as well, I guess.
Well, I think, Adam, if you're looking to achieve certain success in a particular field, if you can find someone that's done it and has achieved great success, and somehow connect with them, whether that's on email or the telephone or maybe even face-to-face or through YouTube. I mean, it just takes away so much of the learning experiences, mistakes that most people seem to have to make in business. But I think, the old saying of, you got to make all the mistakes yourself. I think in this day and age, you can actually profit from other people's mistakes by hearing them and their stories. And if you are fortunate enough to be able to connect with them one-on-one, and sometimes you've got to pay for that. I mean, there are professional coaches and people like that you can hire. And generally, I think if you look back, the cost or the investment to utilise those services is normally a terrific one to leverage. But oftentimes, if you can get access to these people, you will find a way, and they often will help you if they have the time available. And it just takes you, it can take you 5 years ahead of where you would have got without them.
Yeah, I think it's incredible the amount that you can fast track your learning and your journey by reaching out to certain mentors. And I think it was Warren Buffett that said it's obviously much cheaper to learn from other people's mistakes than your own.
That's right. Well, you just think about it, and people don't really get access unless you invest or you listen to them, to Buffett. But if you had him by your side and you had some money set aside to invest and you had 15 minutes with Warren Buffett, I mean, what an incredible experience. Now, you may not directly be able to access him, but you can access his information and you can read books about him and you can invest with people that have learned from him. So it may not always be a direct mentorship, but sometimes it's an indirect one.
Yeah, and reading through his books and his annual reports is incredibly eye-opening and valuable. And it's always just astounds me that they often put, as you say, when you write a book, you've got to clarify your thinking and put your best stuff in there. And all these virtual mentors or authors or people who share their ideas have done that, and they make it available so freely to us. It's just so fantastic.
Adam, there was a book he wrote, or I don't think he wrote, I think someone else wrote it about him, but it was called something like Letters from the Chairman, and it was basically a compilation of letters that he wrote over many years to the chairman of the companies that he had been heavily invested in. Now, again, I got that book many years ago, and it's still in my bookshelf back at home, but just reading it and reading the way he saw things and the way he encouraged people. And, because the story goes, even if he had a massive stake, 10, 15, 25% in a company, and he had that sometimes was, hundreds of millions of dollars in his world, he would generally not speak to them other than once a year. He'd have a conversation, he'd write them a letter and say, based on my thinking, these are the things we need to be focused on this year. And I'd be encouraging you to look at these priorities and look at this area of the business. And so he simplified it. And that's one of the things that I have learned, because people complicate business too much. And Buffett really simplified it. And then he got out of the way and he let people do their thing. And inevitably, as you look back now, he's arguably the best investor in the last 30 years.
Yeah, I love his story. John, thank you for sharing your wonderful insights today. Now, have you got any final pieces of wisdom or anything you'd like to get off your chest before we call it a day?
Look, Adam, not a lot. As I think, though, if people are listening, if they're either young business people, aspiring business people, or mature business people, it doesn't really matter. I sort of live by a couple of philosophies. One is anything's possible. So wherever your business is today is not that relevant. It's where do you want to take it, how big can you dream, and how far do you want to go. So I think the first thing is, get into the concept that anything you want to achieve, you can. The second thing is recognise that you probably already have the skills and the opportunity to achieve that. What often happens, though, is we get stuck. And we get stuck from fear, or we get stuck through uncertainty, complacency. There's a whole range of things that can get in the way. So I just encourage people, some of the stuff we've spoken about, get a mentor, get a business coach, get someone that can help you get unstuck, because I will guarantee everyone listening that there's probably a 10x opportunity in the next few years if you take that. And obviously people listening to you and the speakers that you line up and so forth, they're already the smart brigade, which is a great start. But yeah, hopefully this few minutes we've spent is of some value as well. So I appreciate you having me on. Thanks, Adam.
It's a pleasure, John. So that's a wrap for the chat with John McGrath.
What did you feel resonated the most with you?
What I like about it and him, Tobes, is the fact that he just seems very consistent and very authentic and very caring. Like, he's been in this role, I think, according to his LinkedIn profile, 25 years or more.
Wow.
Yeah. The one role for 25 years, it's amazing. And I love that level of consistency. And I certainly hope that'll be the case for us. We've been going 11 and a half years now with Blue Wire. And I just love it that it's one thing that he's just continued to do consistently and get better and better. But the other thing that I like about what he said, and also him as a person, was that, even in his book that I read years ago, it's all about being authentic and caring and being genuine as well. And when I've met him on these speaking roadshows, he's been very kind to everybody. He's been very polite to everybody, despite his big profile. And that's what a lot of other people say about him too. He remembers everybody. He's good with names. He makes time for people. So anyway, just somebody that I have liked and would like to try and emulate a bit more.
Yeah, it's always nice when someone makes it big but manages to keep that humility as well, because it doesn't always go hand in hand, I don't think. And I really admire that in a person for sure.
Yeah, the humility that's a great way of putting it. Yeah, absolutely. Because yeah, you're right. It doesn't always end up like that.
No. Yeah, so this show is brought to you by the 33 free marketing templates, which you can grab from our website, bluewiremedia.com.au/book. And you can get in touch with me if you've got any direct questions. My email address is toby.jenkins@bluewiremedia.com.au, or I'm on Twitter @Toby_Jenkins.
Cool. And I'm the same. I'm adam.franklin@bluewiremedia.com.au if you've got any email questions or suggestions or anything else. And Tobes, we've got a 5-star review on iTunes that I want to share from The Waterboy. He has said, "Well done on creating an awesome podcast so full of actionable info. I particularly enjoy the solo episodes, so more of those would be great. Highly recommended for anyone running their own business." Interesting there. We were actually just chatting before this show that we will do more solo shows. So there's a bit of feedback from The Waterboy. Yeah, I think a few more solo shows from each of us could be a good way to roll. I know we did quite a few at the start, like in the first 20 or 30 episodes of the podcast. So time to bring them back. And on that note, I think it's time to call it a day. I look forward to seeing you on the next show. And Toby, I'll see you on the next show as well. See you guys.